Hi all. These are generally conversations between adults after the children have left the table. The language can be spicy and the subjects can get saucy. So if you're ready, this is the Southern Fork. Unscripted kitchen chats and also studio chats with some of the most interesting voices in the culinary South. I'm Stephanie Burt, a food and beverage writer who travels with her fork to write for a variety of publications, from magazines you might have on your coffee table to the website you love to visit for your favorite recipes. And I'm inviting you to come behind the scenes with me to get to know the people who make this Southern culinary landscape so special. I'm always hungry for the next bite, thirsty for that next sip, and ready for the next conversation. Let's dig in. The Southern Fork is proud to say that once again, the presenting sponsor for Season 8 is Townsend Automotive in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. First off, thanks to so many of you listeners out there who not only decided to purchase a vehicle from this family-owned business in the last 2 years, but also shared with them that it was directly because of their support of this show. That's what community, even in our virtual format, is all about. Second, Townsend Automotive, celebrating 49 years serving West Alabama, has been extending its reach so that you don't even have to be in the Tuscaloosa area to purchase a car from them. Nationwide vehicle delivery service is available for Southern Fork listeners, and it's something that makes buying just the right new or certified pre-owned vehicle even easier. Visit townsendhonda.com for current inventory, or, of course, if you're in West Alabama, stop in. Townsend Automotive always salutes local entrepreneurs, from restaurateurs to podcasters, and they welcome you to be part of a community that does the same. Husband and wife team Erin Eisele and James Alford created the concept for Cork Cap Bottle Shop on their first date. It now lives beyond the imagination in a yellow Craftsman house in downtown Aiken, South Carolina, and in the few years it's been opened, has impacted the culinary landscape of the Midlands. James, a wine professional, had worked for distributors and restaurants crafting wine lists, including Motor Supply Company in Columbia, and as a consultant. Sip by sip, he learned exactly what he'd like to put on the shelves. Erin, a native of Aiken and marketing and local food advocate, understood the region and the way spaces and places like Cork and Cap can make an impact on a community and for the producers they champion. Together, they've created a space that is way more than a retail shop. It is a learning experience, an enthusiastic advocate for modern winemaking, a community space, and a place, essentially, that is much more about the culture of sharing good food and drink around the table than just a bottle of wine. Wine is the creative beginning for Erin and James, and it is taking them delicious places. Welcome to the Southern Fork, you two.
Thanks, Stephanie. Thanks for having us.
What a beautiful excuse to come to Aiken, South Carolina on a Monday morning when everyone else is going into their Monday status meeting, and we're having pet nap.
We sure are.
I'm very happy.
Yeah. Cheers.
Cheers. People will have listened to the intro, so they know I wrote about Aiken in the past, and so really delved into, but you have really come onto the scene since that article and really come into your own. And I've been hearing so much buzz. I just was like, let me clock some miles and get up here. And I'm so happy to have this excuse. We've had some great phone conversations about wine already. we are drinking something that I think is really indicative and on purpose indicative of kind of your aesthetic here at the store, at the bottle shop. And I want to start with that because it's a great way in, but also I think it will begin to help listeners understand why I just don't interview every bottle shop on the corner. Okay, so this is a really beautiful light salmon, kind of peachy color. And James, will you tell us about it?
Sure. So it's a pet nat made by Michael Cruz with his winery Cruz Wine Company. And pet nat is short for the French term pétillant naturel, which kind of, to condense things, means that instead of making sparkling wine in what we would call the traditional method or the classic method or the method champenoise, we're making it in what is sometimes called the ancient method or pétillant naturel. So we're skipping a few steps that would occur in method champenoise, and we're taking a more direct route to having a finished sparkling wine in the bottle. And very often you get maybe some more rustic flavors, some more kind of like homey and direct and expressive flavors because of just the different winemaking methods and the different means of selecting fruit with this. And I would also say the opportunity to use different grapes for this, because you can kind of avail yourself of a broader spectrum of varieties when you're making pet nat. But yeah, the grape here is Saint Laurent, which, if you're at all familiar with Austrian wine, is going to be one of your most important red grapes for red wine making in the country of Austria. In this case, it's growing in a little vineyard that was planted, if I'm recalling correctly, in Carneros. Saint Laurent kind of has a lot of overlapping characteristics with Pinot Noir. Mm-hmm. And of course, many of the world's greatest sparkling wines are made from Pinot Noir. The name of the grape itself comes from the fact that this grape was thought to undergo veraison, which is when a red grape, when its skin goes from green to red, when it changes color. Mm-hmm. It was thought that was thought to happen on the feast day of Saint Laurent. And so,
I love a feast day reference.
Yeah.
Because I'm all about feast days.
So yeah, Michael Cruz just sort of taking a grape that is not all that well known outside of its homeland of Austria and making a style that 10, 12, 13 years ago was still not really all that well known, has of course exploded into popularity now.
Is one of the three most important words right now in wine as far as Instagram and any social media goes, and that's natural wine, pet nat, and orange.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we've got one of the top three here. It's really great to see this idea. I mean, it's a beautiful bottle. It's California. It's doing this idea and this idea of modern winemaking. And that's really, I feel like your focus and your education focus here is winemaking is modern, but very old, very ancient. And that's what's so fun and fascinating about it. And also the geography of it's pretty cool too. Yeah, I forgot about the tasting. That's real good. But see, my Southern comes out. I don't even say really good. I say real good. That idea of modern wine making, modern bottle shop, I feel like you're firmly in that world. Can you explain that to somebody who's just walking in off the street? Because you have to do that a lot in your world, especially in Aiken, South Carolina.
A modern approach is definitely something that fits into the spectrum of adjectives that we would use when describing ourselves. Wine can be so intimidating, and it has this air of elitism around it for a lot of people.
In America,
exactly.
The elitism does not exist in other parts of the world.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Much of that, to your point, actually, much of that is self-imposed. Much of that is people who have gone out of their way to, rather than bring wine to the market as an agricultural product, they bring it to the market as a luxury good. And so it's like, here is this.
Wait. I'm doing the Oprah thing where I'm like, you got to repeat that. It's not Super Soul Sunday. It's Super Wine Monday. But say that again.
Sure. It's a difference between focusing on wine as an agricultural product rather than a luxury good.
And that is what we do here at the Southern Fork, because I focus on that moment between changing nature into nurture. And that's what agricultural products and cooking does. And so seeing wine as an agricultural product might be a subtle thing, but it's mind blowing, completely different approach.
Absolutely. And when you stop viewing wine, or if you really wanted to drill down into it, even certain categories of wine as something that's aspirational, but instead as just something that is a component of the table. We would no more view it as aspirational than we would the butter we put on the table or the olive oil that we put on the table. And all of those.
And we have been trying to make all of those aspirational in America.
We have. No, we
Culture
have.
butter, olive oil. We are trying really hard to make things that don't fit into a system, into our system.
Exactly.
Like that.
No, when you can, at the end of the day, it's part of living in a capitalist country or a capitalist society. You have to commodify something. You have to package it to make it desirable. And if you have a growing sector of people who are actively searching for goods that are aspirational, well, then you repackage something as that. You take something as simple as dry rosé, for example, which, not even a generation ago was thought of as like, the simple little poolside wine or the thing that we put into the picnic basket or what have you. And now there's billionaires on Instagram doing influencer ads with rosé. And I'm like, when did this happen? Like, when did rosé become like the thing that you ordered for bottle service in the club?
It is true, because I have it in my fridge right now, and it might have been $7.99. I'm not gonna lie.
But we're sitting here at around lunchtime right now with a bottle of rosé as well, bubbly rosé, but still rosé.
We don't want to be fancy. We want people to feel welcome coming in the door, and we can meet you where you are. You can know nothing about wine. You can know a lot about wine, and we're happy to explain that to people and welcome them here.
Let's talk about here for a minute.
Okay.
Because I think it's important to know, everyone needs to know the backstory of why you chose Aiken for Cork and Cap.
Sure. Well, I grew up here, and I haven't lived here since 1996, but my parents came here because my dad got a job at DuPont. It was DuPont back then. So I am an SRS kid, the Savannah River site.
Mm-hmm. And there's two kinds. There's a division in Aiken for sure.
Mm-hmm. So my parents have lived here my whole adult life, and we've come here for family functions. But it wasn't until James and I have been together for nearly 10 years that we decided to come back to Aiken to open a bottle shop, because while there were places to buy wine in Aiken, there wasn't that community hub wine shop that we really felt like was a need here. Because when we would come here, we were searching for that kind of experience. And we thought, if we're searching for that kind of experience, we're sure other people are too.
Yeah, for sure. And what are some real things that you do? Do you have a little list of things that you do to calm people down so that they start to engage with you? Because once they engage, you've got them. You can talk with them. You can guide them.
One element of that is wrapped up in the curb appeal of the place. We were really lucky to kind of stumble into this property, which is this homey little World War I era Craftsman yellow cottage. And
that's why I'm moving in. That is my era.
It's hard to look at that building really and be intimidated. It's not a bunch of glass and steel with sleek modern lines. And, it looks like you need, to be wearing a $3,000 suit to even walk in the door. It looks like a little house in a little southern town. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's part of it. Another thing that you would pretty much have to see pretty much as soon as you walk through our front door was an idea that Erin had from the get-go, which is our 6 for $60 display. So we carry all different manners of wine and all different manners of price points in here. But one thing that we have every single day It is a display where you can put together 6 different wines for $60. I defy most people to go to Food Lion these days and try to do that.
Oh, no.
And so somebody who walks in here who is maybe thinking like, oh gosh, like, am I going to have to, grab that credit card that I don't really want to use just so I can buy something in here so I don't look bad? They see 6 for $60 and they're like, oh, okay.
We can do this.
These guys are meeting people like where they are. So from a price standpoint, I would say that's part of it. And then, we really just, once we get into conversation with people, we really try to make them at ease by just letting them know, one of the things we say over and over is that, nobody should ever feel bad about what they like. So people will come in here and they'll see a lot of wines on the shelves that maybe they don't see other places in town, or in many cases, other places in the state. And they'll think like, oh gosh, like, I really like these wines that have broad distribution and a lot of commercial appeal. So I must be wrong. I must not be where I need to be to shop here yet. And we try to tell people all the time, look, what you like is right by default because you trust your palate. So let us know what that is. Let us know what you like, and we can show what we have that can fit into that as well. So we say all the time, rather than putting people in an either or situation, like, hey, you should shop here to buy this instead of shopping in other places. We tell people, hey, the stuff that you already like, great, keep liking it. And also, there are these new things that you might not have heard of before. So instead of just moving people's narrow focus to be a narrow focus on this rather than a narrow focus on that, we try to broaden their focus.
This is a philosophy class this morning, and I'm digging it. I am digging it. So I would love for you, because we've talked about this, to talk about, people understand this with clothing. So maybe you can connect this. You have certain labels, you have certain vintages, you have certain winemakers that other places don't have. So how does that work? And we hear the word exclusivity, so we think expensive. But can you dig into that a little bit for us about how you choose bottles and how it's different than just your regular box store?
Well, James and I have always said that people will drink different things if they have the option to do so, and it tastes good, right?
The tastings are paramount.
So we decided from the get-go that every Saturday we would do a free wine tasting from 12 to 3. And these aren't, tastings to get rid of the cases in the back. We think about these, we curate these tastings every weekend, and we work with our distributors, and we work with a lot of really great distributors that work with the type of producers that we want to champion. So it's inviting people in to say, hey, come taste some wine on a Saturday, grab some food from one of our neighbors, and make an afternoon out of it. So we started this, putting like 1 or 2 geeky things on the wine table, and found that people were really digging it and, really open to that. So it's been really fun to see our biggest white wine seller. The first year we were open was a Swiss white, a Chasselas.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow, that's fun.
Yeah, it just kind of caught on, and it was on the tasting table. There are a lot of people.
I only had that wine last year. I love it though.
Yeah, I mean,
it's so drinkable for the South.
Right.
It makes sense.
It makes so much sense.
Right.
But we work with really great distributors who have portfolios that we believe in. And then it's just a matter of getting people to trust us. And once they try one thing that they aren't sure about and they love it, they want to come back for more.
What about wine attracted you, but also gives you a sense of purpose larger than yourself?
I think for me, it was living in a winemaking region. I lived in northern Italy for a year. And in America, you can't understand unless you're living in, California, Oregon.
Finger Lakes or parts of Texas.
Absolutely.
Little parts of Virginia. Sorry. Got to shout out to my southern people.
Yeah. Shout out to the southern people. But on a scale where that is what the region is known for.
Right.
That wine was an integral part of the community, the table, It's what everyone talked about. The seasons revolved around wine. And so it was experiencing wine in that way that changed it for me, because I've been drinking wine since I was of legal age.
Of course, only.
Because Boone's doesn't really count, and that was what I was drinking in high
No,
school.
and I mixed it in a blender with some ice cream when I was of legal age.
How'd that turn out for you?
It was basically, I don't know. I don't remember much.
Right.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I didn't mean to digress about Boone's Farm.
No,
This
okay.
isn't a show about that.
Yeah. But I think I thought I knew a little bit about wine, but it wasn't until being immersed in a region like that where it's such an important
It's
product.
a culture
yes,
instead
it's
of a
culture.
product.
Yes.
Right. What about for you?
I maybe came to wine a good bit differently than Erin, because I didn't have any meaningful trips to winemaking regions until well after I had become a professional in the wine world. But yeah, I think what I often wondered, whether I realized I was wondering it or not, was how come of all of these different consumable goods that we encounter in our life, wine attracted people to commit their life to it. You know, like how come there weren't people out there, you know, who were making it their life's work to specialize in different types of mineral water, and I'm sure there are, but I'm talking about in great
cheese,
numbers. There are things like cheesemongers and things like that, but
whiskey makers.
You didn't see, you know, if you heard about somebody who like committed their life to being a cider expert, you'd be like, oh wow, I've never heard of that before.
Right.
It probably exists.
Of course.
But it's not something where there are entire extensive communities and subcultures built around it. I was like, what is this about wine? And then I had one of my first wine jobs. I had sort of this aha moment one time where I had this very, very humble, I think it might have cost $11, French red from the region of Minervois. It was a red Minervois, and I smelled it, and it just immediately, if you remember that scene in Ratatouille where the mean food critic like eats the ratatouille
And he has that little
flashbacks and it goes like back to his grandmother's table or his mother's table or whatever it is. And he just goes like, oh my God, it's like this, it triggers that. And like our olfactory senses are the ones that are most closely linked to memory. And I was back on this trip that I took to France when I was 19, and like the aromas of that part of southern France and like the way that it smelled when like the sun was setting and stuff. And I realized that wine could do that, and that wine could be a transmitter of those elements of memory. And as soon as I realized that, like it was over.
Yeah.
I was just like, why in the world would I be interested really in much of anything else as far as like building a base of knowledge or building an expertise around a consumable good when there's this one thing that can do that? And so from there, it kind of like very non-systematically blossomed out into some other opportunities. But I think that's part of what keeps getting me out of bed every morning, is that even after doing wine as a profession for a little over 20 years now, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say every month, or maybe even every other month or something, I still learn about a grape I haven't heard of before.
That is what's so cool. And wine kind of caught me. I mean, those that have been on the journey with me, thank you, listeners. I know who you are. Notice that the last few years have been more wine episodes than were before. And that's because wine has caught my creative imagination. And this show is about that too. It's fascinating because it is one of those things that you can spend your life learning. And you can also go visit places, and you can experience harvest, and you can experience bottling, and there's just a lot that you can do. But that's what's also so good about food and drink, is you can do that your whole life too. You can build that palate. You can build experiences. And I mean, I'm walking in today, and you just had a class of Bordeaux on a budget last night. And so this is really set up for a class, but it doesn't look like a classroom. It looks like a fun moment, fun dinner party waiting to happen. You're really anchoring a lot of education, and it is becoming a third place. It is becoming a community place in Aiken. I have to ask, what's next? What's making you hungry?
So, I would say that, you approach a question like that, from two angles. One is that at the end of the day, this is a business. It's a for-profit enterprise. And so, everyone's had that business teacher, economics teacher who tells you, if you're not moving forward, you're drowning or whatever. And so you always do need to be thinking about, what is the next thing? How are we going to keep diversifying our appeal? And so, yeah, we are, I guess you could say, hungry to figure that out. At the same time, one of the things that interests me right now is how can we keep making this a really exciting place to come for people that enjoy wine and beer and, the various little gourmet food goods that we carry and stuff like that. But anyone who's been paying attention to the beverage press over the last 5 or 6 years especially knows that the sober and sober curious community is exploding in popularity. And I personally, for many different reasons, think that is good on so many different levels. And somebody might be like, oh, how you sell wine for a living? How could you think that it's good that those communities are exploding? Well, they are still people that are interested in exploring the intersection of like good beverages and good drinks. And that at the end of the day is our business. At the end of the day, it's helping people to discover the intersection of these different sets of flavors and not so much getting them drunk. I mean, compared to even 10 years ago, compared to 5 years ago, there are beverage producers and beverage distributors and what have you that are getting much more creative and aggressive with how they are exploring how to serve the sober community, the people who don't drink alcohol, with beverages that aren't just water or coffee or tea or what have you, but just much more thoughtfully, creatively rendered products. So that's one thing that I feel challenged, positively challenged by is, how do we meet those people and how do we kind of place ourselves meaningfully at that intersection?
We've also noticed that Aiken is very hungry, and we love exploring the intersection of food and wine while we don't have a kitchen and we're not exactly a wine bar. We do have our on-premise license and we have snacky things, artisan cheeses, olives, salumi, that sort of stuff. But we're also doing a chef pop-up series this spring that we're really excited about, bringing in some area chefs to pop up with us, some coming from Colombia, in fact. So we're really happy that this space allows us to bring people on site. We, do pairings for these pop-ups, and we've got beer garden tables outside, and it's a really fun, comfortable, and accessible way to dine al fresco in downtown Aiken.
It is beautiful today. It makes me think about dining al fresco, not getting back in my car and going back to my email. Not that I don't like it when people email me, because I don't have a job if people don't email me. So keep going, keep emailing. What is one aspect of your job that really meshes like a puzzle piece with an aspect of your natural personality?
I am a creative thinker, which you have to be a creative thinker to be an entrepreneur. And my communications and marketing background, I'm also just kind of inherently a storyteller. And so there's a story in every bottle and every package of the store. So I feel like, constant pressure to tell all those stories. So that is definitely two aspects that naturally fit into this job that I feel very blessed to be able to use.
Yeah, storytelling is very helpful.
Yeah.
Ever since I was a kid, I had a really natural inclination to pull for or stick up for the underdog or the little guy. One of the things that really allows us just to have a through line with how we do things here is that if you start at like the nucleus of us, we are a small family-owned business that's 2 people big, that's in a small southern town of 30,000 people. And we don't have billboards up and down the interstate. We don't have $500,000 ads in Wine Spectator. We don't have television ad campaigns.
Good for them, still getting that price.
Right. if you want to find us, you probably had to be intentional about it. Well, that ripples through into exactly what we do. And, we don't put the wines that we put on our shelves to be contrarian. We're not sitting here saying like, oh, well, these wines are successful and therefore they're, pedestrian or vulgar or whatever, because they're successful. No, they're successful for a reason. And for people who I'm not going to say any brand names right now, but everybody knows what the popular wines are. You can go to a Publix or to any various number of chain stores and see what dominates the end caps, what dominates the shelf space at eye level. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with success. But we think that we can be intentional and introduce people to these smaller producers, to these people that aren't, wearing a suit and sitting in a skyscraper, but who's a farmer that's making $50,000 a year, and put his wine on our shelves and let you see how, his wine or her wine is really worth seeking out. Erin's heard me say this a million times. Our customers have heard me say it a million times, but one thing that we really, really try to guard ourselves from is novelty for the sake of novelty. We don't want to be different just because it's different.
That's a great way that Americans dismiss being curious and learning.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
They just use that adage of, I don't want it just because it's new and you haven't learned anything.
Exactly.
There's an anti-education kind of bent to that.
First and foremost, if we bring you a wine, if we put it on our shelves, if we put it in your hands, if we say you should try this, it's because we think it's delicious. It's because we think this product is excellent.
And it's really fun to share what you like. And if somebody likes it too, then you have something in common and you're like, isn't that good?
Right.
And you're like, yeah, it is good. And you just you just have a moment.
We're
nice.
genuinely excited about everything that's in the store. And so someone will say, what Chardonnays do you have on the shelf or whatever? And, we'll walk over to that section and I'll just start seeing the labels and being like, oh, this one is good because of this. Oh, and this one, we're genuinely excited about each one and can point people in the right direction. But it's so fun to be excited about and to know a lot of these people too. It's personal.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it is personal.
It's so much more meaningful, I think, to sit there and say like, hey, here's this bottle of Lioka Chardonnay made by my friend Matt, who I've known for 14 years, who I know for a fact, because I have been with him to these places, has a real meaningful connection to this piece of land or to this grape grower or to this winemaker. Here is this made by this person. Rather than, oh, this got 97 points. Mm-hmm. We're not big fans of points. That's probably a whole other podcast.
That's a whole other podcast.
And like any business that's successful, it's 99% relationships. And so it's the relationships with our customers, obviously. But then it's also the relationships that we have with the people that we're representing. Mm-hmm. And if I'm a consumer and I'm going into a wine shop, I'm much more interested in hearing somebody tell me about this person that they know and the thing that they make, rather than here's this thing and it got this press that was maybe or maybe not purchased. That those points maybe weren't bought at a certain rate.
Right.
So I think just to put a bow on that, it's finding and seeking out the little guy who's doing something that really needs a pedestal. Whatever small extra little height we can put on that pedestal, we love doing that.
Now this is a quick fire. One thing keeping you up at night.
As a small business owner, I would be remiss to say that I don't think about small business things constantly.
Yeah.
Another thing that stresses me out a lot, and a lot of people in the wine world, is that the climate is so important to any artisanal product. The prosciutto di Parma, there has to be the fog coming in from the river to create the mold that gives it that certain taste. That's so open to disruption in a bad way when our climate is, a little out of control right now. So I do worry about those things. I would say that just the pressures of keeping this going in the way that we're going and, firing on all cylinders at all times can keep me up as well.
Cost of goods. I'm just going to keep it real because, like I said, we are a business. Cost of goods is something that obviously translates into the price that we charge the consumer, but it also translates into the price that we are charged by winemakers. We just got done talking about how we like to champion the little guy. Well, when the little guy is making things on a much smaller scale, their pricing structure is necessarily different.
Yeah, they can't buy 3 million bottles.
Yeah. And so if they need to charge us $30 wholesale, and then we need to mark that up accordingly so that we can keep the lights turned on as well. And somebody comes in and says like, oh yeah, I'm looking for a wine like that, but I really want to pay like, $21 retail. Well, the reality is that we can't. But if the perceived value in the market hasn't caught up with the reality of what things actually cost, then you've got a big fight ahead of you. And the silver lining in that, I think, is that it spurs us, both Erin and I, to be creative about how we present these things to people, about, how are we going to put this in front of somebody to convince them that what they wanted to pay $21 for, they need to be realistic about paying $39 for, or even something on a lower scale, what they wanted to pay $2 for, they should be realistic about paying $3.99 for. But
we're all on that journey.
We're seeing that everywhere right now. And it's inflation, but it's also just, I think the positive facet of that is a lot of people waking up to the fact that their labor and their efforts are worth more.
I think that's a really key point. And I think also what's mixed in that we're not talking about is price gouging.
Of course.
Which is creating distrust across the system. I think the egg conversation is part of that.
Of course.
And so then you have a defensive consumer who already is distrustful. And then you are trying to have this other conversation, which is a lot more nuanced. And it's difficult.
Yeah.
No one's helping.
And I think we try to put it to people in a way where we are showing them that, look, we are offering you this slightly more expensive thing instead of this cheaper thing because we want to be able to sell you things with a straight face at any price. Mm-hmm. And I would rather give you, I'm just going to pull a varietal out of the air right now. This isn't necessarily a representative example, but I would rather give you a $25 Pinot Grigio that I can really sleep well knowing I've given you an excellent product than to put a $12 Pinot Grigio in your hand that, costs you half as much, but that I know is garbage. I don't want to save you money and eclipse the entire purpose of why I'm here, which is to give you a better product.
Right. And that's building trust.
Yeah.
So on that note, we always want to leave people hungry. So I have something I call the magic picnic basket. And this is my final question. It is a fun question to ask. I love to get to know people through this podcast, but I also like to get to know you through what you eat. I can time travel. I can go back and ask someone to make just one more bite of something you loved. I can cook a little bit, and I can source for you. And I'd love for you two to build a box together, since you've built a life and a business together, a picnic basket, together, and put a couple things in it each. So what can I put in that basket?
And we're doing food and beverage?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It can be all beverage.
We definitely want to put some food in that basket.
No, we've definitely got to put some food in the basket.
What's something that you and I have shared that we keep talking about?
One of the things that I'm definitely going to put into the basket is something that's actually an important component of what we do here at Cork and Cap, and a product that Erin and I have had a love affair now with pretty much since we met. And that is really, really good conserva or tinned fish. And
tinned fish is a really popular ingredient in the magic picnic basket. We all love it.
and the thing was, when Erin and I first got together, neither one of us were like nuts about it. We were both open to it, but we threw together this literal picnic basket one time to go to a little jaunt out to a state park. And we were actually in Gourmet Shop in Columbia. Shout out to Brian and all the people there. And so we saw this tinned fish that just looked incredible. And we're like, we got to try.
And a lot of listeners are like, tinned fish is sexy.
And we grabbed a couple that looked good to us.
That's a whole nother podcast, ladies and gentlemen.
And we found ourselves, looking at, what was in there and like putting a little bit on some bread, putting a little bit here and trying it, being like, oh my God. And then finding out that like the olive oil that it's in is half the point as well, because it's so flavorful. And we were just done after that. So some manner of really, really good Spanish or Portuguese conserva would have to be in there.
I'm trying to think back to something that we've shared that would go well in a picnic basket.
I can think of one that I wasn't going to say because I thought you were going to say
Well,
that.
this is magic picnic basket.
It's magic.
So
you can go back in time.
You can go back in time, and also it doesn't have to be a picnic. I can set up a full meal.
That's right. What were you going to say?
I was going to put mortadella in there.
Oh, yeah. Well, mortadella, definitely. So we'd have to have some lambrusco if we're going to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I also would love a lobster roll in there drenched in butter because I don't have them very often, but it is quite delicious.
So the thing about wine for a picnic like this is that, if you're given the opportunity to pick anything in the world, you might think about like the rarest this or the most expensive that. But the fact is that when you're outside and when you have food like that, just some of the most accessible wines can provide some of the most pleasure. So I would say any number of like alpine whites that we've had. When I say alpine, I just mean like from colder, more mountainous regions. That includes some Sicilian whites that both of us have really enjoyed. The Swiss whites, Northern Italian whites. Just with a picnic lunch like that, that kind of wine is so refreshing. I know this word sounds kind of ridiculous, but it's actually invigorating. I feel like it actually kind of like wakes you up because it typically has like a more like elevated, like acidic and mineral profile.
Well, that sounds great. But before we say goodbye, I need a little more of this wine because I want to talk about this, which is I think that it has a really grapey, like Concord grape kind of thing. And you taught me a new word and I love vocab. So what does this term mean?
The wine lexicon is really fun. And if you have a wine that actually tastes like grapes, one of the words you can use for that is foxy. And it's just a fun thing to say.
Well, here's to a foxy podcast.
Yes.
If people want to learn more about Cork Cap Bottle Shop in Aiken, South Carolina, you know where to go. You can go to thesouthernfork.com. I will have links there as well as images so you can see the face behind the voice. Maybe stop in if you're in town for a wine tasting on a Saturday. If you like what you hear, well, as you can hear, this job's pretty good, at least today. There are more than 310 episodes in the archives all over the South, other wine episodes, and a lot of people who mentioned 10 fish, probably even last week's episode. So thanks a lot for having me in the middle of an event weekend yourself. I appreciate it.
Stephanie. It was so fun.
It was a pleasure.
You've been listening to The Southern Fork. I can't wait to bring you more culinary conversations, but in the meantime, I have one question. Are you going to eat all that?